Hello everyone, I would like to share a story that I experienced. As a child, I grew up with a single mother and 4 other siblings. I was the middle child. At that time, we lived in the Project McDonough homes in East St. Paul, Minnesota. As for all those who lived around St. Paul, knows well that it is haunted. Built on top of a cemetery is what I heard. A quick description of the unit that we lived in for years. The housings are all common, 2-story unit, 3 5-bedroom, depending on your qualifications, located upstairs, and a bathroom. Downstairs has a spacious living room, open dining room with a long narrow kitchen. Last but not least, a dark creepy basement right by the entrance door. My family and I lived in a 3-bedroom unit all located upstairs as well as the bathroom. For the years that we lived there, nothing really dramatic happened. Just sometimes we would hear voices. One of the events that happened to me was when I was about 8 years old. The whole family was upstairs hanging out as I was downstairs by myself. During that time, I was really into Britney Spears. I was singing and enjoying myself, sitting on an old rocking chair that we had donated by a church. I was in the middle of the living room, rocking out, singing sometimes. As I was singing, really into the song and all, almost to the end already, something struck my foot. Another voice other than mine jumped right in, singing along. It didn't sound like a child, but a teenage girl's voice. Did I hear the voice from afar? No. It seemed as if it was right behind me. I heard the pronunciation of this entity so clearly, it sent chills through my spine to all the hairs on the back of my neck. It was a good 3 seconds until I realized it. I got up so quick and dashed upstairs where the rest of my family was. As I got upstairs, my brother asked why my face looked so pale. I couldn't even answer because I was in so much shock and confusion of what just happened. Now, when I think about it, why couldn't whatever it was at least just let me finish the song? Hi there, I would like to share an encounter that my aunt, her husband, and her husband's brother had. This happened in the McDonough homes in St. Paul, Minnesota. It was about 5 years ago when my aunt had married her husband and was still living with her in-laws in one of the McDonough homes. Her husband had a son from his ex-wife. He's a divorced man. 8 other brothers, 1 sister, 2 sister-in-laws, about 5 nephews and nieces, and his parents. Wow, talk about a big Hmong family. Since they had a lot of people in their family, the house didn't really fit everyone, and some people had to sleep in the basement and in the living rooms. One calm and sunny day, my aunt and her husband were home alone while everyone else was out doing their own thing. My aunt and her husband decided to clean the house since it was pretty messy. My aunt was vacuuming the bedrooms while her husband was sweeping the floors with a Hmong broom. After my aunt was done vacuuming, she decided to help out her husband. They both walked into one of his brother's bedroom to fix the beds, and they saw something that froze them up. At the window, there was a lady standing, wearing Hmong clothes, looking out the window, singing and talking to herself. My aunt and her husband looked at each other in disbelief, and then kept on looking back at her. They knew that no one was home, and the thing standing by the window was not human. It's pretty common sense for us Hmong people to understand that these kind of things we see aren't human. Her husband was still holding on to the broom at this time. He raised the broom and hit the lady with it. As soon as he hits the lady, she disappeared into thin air. My aunt and her husband were really scared. They dropped everything and ran out into their car and drove off until nighttime. The next morning, the brother who slept in that room said that he saw a Hmong lady. He said that he was laying in bed and was not fully asleep yet. The lights were off and he was just looking at his phone when he felt something touching his feet. He got up, turned on the lights, and saw nothing. He didn't think much, so he turned off the lights again and went back into bed. Then, as soon as he fell asleep, something pulled his blanket. He felt it and pulled it back. but whatever was pulling his blanket would not let go. It just kept on pulling his blanket. Then, he felt a cold hand under his blanket and touched his right foot. The brother screamed and turned on the lights. That night, he could not sleep a single wink. About a week later, they had to uneng for him, and the shaman said that a Hmong lady had died in that house. She touched and pulled the brother's blanket because that's how her bed was placed when she was still alive. Not only so, that was the room that she slept in. Soon after, they moved out. My aunt said that when she drives past the house, she would sometimes see the Hmong lady at the window. I don't know if anyone's currently living in that house in the McDonough homes, but if you are, good luck, and I hope you don't see anything. Interested in sharing your stories? Submit them to HmongChronicles@gmail.com or in the description below. Here is the next story. Thank you. Anyone who knows me knows I'm the most skeptic Hmong person when it comes to ghost stories. I'll hear a story here and there, but I second guess everything. Well, maybe it was just a wind. Maybe it was just a rusty pipe. Maybe the wood's been aging under wet conditions. Maybe you're just tired. You get the point. I know people like me can be frustrating to work with. But I think that it's time to share a secret of my own. I too have a ghost story, and for those who share the same skeptic personality trait as me, I don't blame you one bit if you say that this story is all made up. This story isn't anything scary, but I still remember that one exact moment that sends chills up my spine. And now, without further ado, here's a story I experienced growing up. I grew up in the McDonough projects in St. Paul, Minnesota. For those of you who have lived there, you may have had stories of your own. This story takes place during the summer of 2001. I was 6 years old at the time, and my older brother was 7. During the summer, I don't know if there was a mass migration of caterpillars, but the project was filled with these bugs. They were on the sidewalks, streets, windows, indoors, you name it. The boys in the area started spraying caterpillars off the trees using water guns and hoses. The amount of caterpillars that died that day was unreal. My brother and I didn't take part in the killing, but we saw what these kids had done. Later that night, we climbed into our beds and slept. I woke up in the middle of the night because I saw something in the middle of our twin bed. It was a white and translucent object. As I became more awake, I saw a tree. Yes, a tree. Nothing humanoid, just a tree. It was a small tree. It looked like a dead one. Unable to process what I had just saw, I woke up my brother. He was obviously pissed, but he was also shocked that there was a tree in the middle of our bed. I was the brave one. I got up, walked to it, and tried to touch it. And as you may have guessed, my hand went right through. Unsure of what to do next, I ran across the room and flipped the light switch. The light came on, and everything disappeared. My brother and I looked at each other for a while. We were confused. Right as I flipped the lights back off, the tree reappeared in the same exact spot. I repeatedly turned on the lights on and off, and the tree would disappear and reappear. I turned off the lights and crawled back to my side of the bed. I was scared, of course, so I covered my head with my blanket. I occasionally peeked to look at the tree and noticed that it was growing bigger and bigger. Then, caterpillars began descending from the tree with webs. They crawled all over our blankets. These caterpillars were white like the tree. And of course, my brother went back to sleeping like a baby. As I got a little sleepier because of the heat, I saw hundreds of caterpillars crawling on top of our blanket. Some were crawling on my face, and I tried to shake them off. I eventually passed out and never spoke of the event. Fast forwarding ahead, 7 years passed, and my family moved houses about 3 times already. I shared with my brother about this caterpillar dream that happened 7 years ago. He looked at me and said that it wasn't a dream. He said I woke him up and flipped the light switches a few times, and then the chills came back, just like the chills from that night. Yes, it's true, and it's sad that when I hear ghost stories today, my initial reaction is still, yeah, whatever, but after a while, it does get to me because of that one night. This story took place in Laos during the Vietnam War, and it is a story my father told me many times before. To begin, this story will be the exact words from my father and his experiences. I remember it was a very beautiful summer and the war was getting near home when I had met my pa. My pa chika. She was a very attractive woman and her white skin blew me away. I started seeing her for about 1 month, and then I heard the news that her mother had passed away. We had not seen each other for about 2 weeks. After the burial of her mother, I decided to pay her a visit. It was a regular visit. We didn't have phones in between our ears. Instead, the only thing that stood between me and her was the bamboo wall of her bamboo hut. Her mother had left behind a 2-month-old baby, but on this night, her father was not home either, just her and her sibling. It was about midnight. The full moon was out, and I was armed with a flashlight and a handgun. As we chat, the baby's bottle started to rock back and forth on a table by an oil lamp inside her bedroom. She said, "Did you hear that? I'm scared. Can you come in and stay inside with me?" Dang, young folk today still use that same trick. Anyways, I walked around the corner toward the front door, and the metal water container was being pounded on. In Laos, there was no water pipe in the home, so Hmong folks used metal and plastic water containers about the height of an average person's knee to hold water from the river. The loud sound went around the other corner of the hut. Eventually, the demon and I met on the backside of the hut. I had my gun drawn and pointed directly in between the 2 red eyes. I wanted to shoot it, but I was afraid it might penetrate through a neighbor's hut. We stood still, looking at each other, and I could feel the hair on my neck stand up. The thing turned and ran towards a big bush about my height. I ran after it and went around the bush a couple of times, but that thing was gone. I went back and informed my pa that I was leaving. She said, "Please don't leave." From that night on, I stopped seeing her. Dang. A few months later, Long Ging was attacked by the communists. I had an AK-47 defending the attackers, but sadly I was shot. As I was lying on the street, to my surprise, my pa's hut was about 20 yards away. But luckily, my good friends raced my injured body to the medic and did the operation on me. I was saved, but I will always remember that experience. Disclaimer: this is a true story about my family friend's mother. To help keep her identity anonymous, we have changed her name in this story to Kam. This is a true event that happened 20 plus years ago. Kam works the late night shift at a cannery in a small town in eastern Washington. She lives on a farmhouse roughly 25 miles from where she works in the middle of nowhere. Seriously, she and her husband own an apple orchard that was 10 acres plus that her husband managed. She worked the night shift and would get off of work at around 3 a.m. There is absolutely nobody on that stretch of road that she drove every night to get home. There was a time when she was on her way home from work, about 15 miles in the drive and right before an uphill curve in the road, when she noticed a faint white figure crossing the roadway. Figuring that it was a deer, she slowed down for it, and before she knew it, it vanished before she could make out what it was. She didn't make much of it that night and continued on her way home. Kam made it home safely and went back to work the next day. After her 3 a.m. shift the next night, she was on her way back home again. At the same spot as the night before, she saw the same faint white figure crossing the road. She began to slow down, fearing that she might hit it, but before she could step on the brakes, it vanished. She looked at the place where it disappeared as she drove by, knowing that she should have seen it being in the open field, but there was no sign of where that thing was. She started to wonder what it could be, and the next day at work, she had told her coworkers about what she had been experiencing the last couple of nights on her way home. Her coworkers started to tell her about a teenage girl who died in a car accident in that area, and she was probably seeing the spirit of that girl. Kam was freaked out after hearing that story, as she strongly believed in the supernatural. After work that night, she was afraid to drive home alone on that road, fearing she might see the ghost of the girl crossing the road, but she knew she had to go home that way, being the only way to get home. Her fears came true as she approached that 15-mile mark where the uphill curve in the road was. She saw that faint white figure crossing the road. So scared, she decided not to slow down, but instead sped up so she wouldn't have to see it and get far away from it as possible. Before she knew it, she was approaching it fast. She had hit it. She was disoriented and confused. How could she have hit this ghost girl, she thought. Her mind was running a mile a minute, and as she got out of her car to see who or what she had hit, she was in disbelief. She had hit a cow. Her car was now totaled and 10 miles away from home at 3:15 in the morning at the same spot where the girl died. Kam was terrified and shaken up. Fortunately for her, a truck driver happened to drive by and picked her up and took her home. My story started off when I was at my aunt's house for Thanksgiving. My aunt is a shaman, and there was a lady along with her daughter during her visit to my aunt's house. She was 13 years old. The lady's daughter met a guy on Facebook, and he's one of her friend's younger brother. Problem is, he is obsessed with her, so he got her pictures everywhere. He asked her to marry him, but she refused because she only saw him as a friend. Stubborn, he told her that after he dies, he's coming back for her. And she's only 13, so she didn't take it very seriously. After he proposed to her and got rejected, he sent her this gold bracelet, but didn't write an address on the package. She couldn't send it back to him, so she kept it, but didn't wear it. Weeks later, he died in a car accident. After his death, he came and took the girl's spirit away. She was a nice girl that listened to her mother, but since that incident, she became stubborn and mean. When her mom asked her to do something, she would yell and refuse. Her mom would start to worry since the girl never behaved before like this. The girl also liked to go to school a lot, but she became sick and she skipped school. Her dad thought she was just trying to get out of school, but her mom knew that something was wrong. The girl grew weaker and weaker each day, and the mom did not know what to do anymore. Then, one day, she heard some lady talk about my aunt and how my aunt was able to help them, so she sought for my aunt's help. My aunt told the mom what the problem was. She tried to convince the boy to let go, but he wouldn't. He claimed that the girl felt the same way towards him. My aunt asked the girl, but the boy was keeping her from talking, so she could only nod. My aunt told him to let her go and that her parents would give him money and everything, but still he refused because he only wanted her. He also told them about the bracelet and all, but my aunt told him that she was young and didn't know anything. It went on for about an hour until the spirit of the boy finally gave up. The girl was possessed with him inside of her body. When he left her body, he still kept the girl mute. My aunt had to do a ritual for her by spraying special water at the girl. While she was performing with her shaman book at the girl to get rid of her muteness, the boy was bashing my aunt spiritually. My aunt had tied 2 strings on the girl's right hand and left leg. After the ritual was done, her mom had to change her name immediately. This will be her 3rd time changing names. After the ritual, they were all going to leave, but the girl looked outside and she saw a boy in their car. When she asked her mom who he was, her mom told her that it was just her mom, and her 2 aunts and their son, and no one else. The girl got scared because the ghost was the boy outside by their car smiling at her and waiting for her. She would not look outside and moved away from the door and hid behind her mom. The mother and daughter told my aunt, and my aunt had to walk them out to their car. I don't know how the girl is doing, but I think she's okay now. But moral of the story, be careful who you are friends with and never accept items from Hmong boys unless they are your boyfriends. If they're not, then you should throw it away or sell it. Anyways, thank you for listening. Please subscribe. Thank you.